Monique. It looks like, can you hear me? I can't hear her. Oh, Monique, you're on mute.
Hey, I was concerned. I didn't think we were going to be able to get in, so I'm glad it let me in.
We're there.
Yeah, I had the same problem. It was not letting me in.
Yeah, I think someone has to actually start it, and I'm not the owner of this, so I don't know who the.
I think it's showing Burke, but that was Mindy's face on there a moment ago. So I think Mindy is the key holder
Okay.
and the gatekeeper.
Sounds good.
You guys remember what movie that's from? What movie is that from?
The gatekeeper.
Are you the gatekeeper? I am the key holder. Are you the key holder? I am the gatekeeper. Seriously, come on. Somebody has to know what movie that's from.
I got nothing.
You have 3 seconds. Think of your worst fear. And all of a sudden, like 17-story tall marshmallow man appears. He's like, really? That's the worst thing? The original Ghostbusters?
Ghostbusters?
Yes.
Well, when you said Marshmallow Man, I got that, but everything before then you lost.
You don't remember Rick Moranis as the key holder?
No.
Oh, you can go back. Well, that's the best part of that movie.
It's the Keymaster, by the way.
Or Keymaster, not Key. I think Keymaster. Are you the
Thank
gatekeeper? I am the Keymaster.
All right, I know who I want on my trivia team.
Right.
Only if it has to predate like 98, because after 98, I quit getting into like movies and stuff like that. Unless it's Marvel, in which case I can answer questions.
Yeah, I'm funny. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Trying to find. So the one thing I never have in front of me when we start this meeting is our subcommittee roster, but I have it now. So I don't know why it's so hard for me I can't ever find it in Basecamp, but it doesn't matter, I have it. Well, we do have an agenda. I guess I can open it and share my screen with the agenda on it for today, but it's really brief. So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to share it and kind of run the risk of us being able to see each other's faces. So I think I'm not going to do that. So I will go ahead and call this meeting to order right now at 5:35, the June 14th, 2021 meeting of the Social Justice, Race and Equity Commission, Police Accountability and Use of Force Subcommittee. Wow, say that 10 times fast. The June 14th meeting, I'm calling it to order at 5:35. Welcome, everyone. I so appreciate you guys being here and making the time to do so. One of the things I love so much about our subcommittee meeting is I feel like we get more work done than a lot of other committees that I am on in a shorter amount of time. So I will try to stay really close to our 1 hour meeting designation time and see if we can get some real work done today. Unless there's anything on anyone's heart and mind as we welcome and call to order, I will go ahead and do roll call. I will start that, and if you are present, please say so. And if you are not present, you don't have to say so. So I have here SJREC, our co-chair. SJREC is out on traveling today, and I am, you're stuck with me. So we're letting he and his family enjoy that time and work as well. So SJREC is absent. Myself, Monique Hudson, I am here. Zaki?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Great, Zaki's present. Connie Todd?
Here.
Janice, Nasi, Janice, say your last name for me.
I'm here, yes.
All right.
Nisi.
Nisi, thank you, Janice. I tried to make it complicated. It wasn't. Sorry about that. Lauren Collins.
Here.
I saw him. Good evening. Davis Burnett, definitely.
Here.
Hey, Davis. Kathy Wells.
Here.
Good evening, Kathy. Jeremiah Henson. I do believe he is no longer on our subcommittee. Is that right? That's right.
Yeah,
Okay. And Kirk Nelson. All right, so I have Sharuk and Kirk as being absent this evening. Thank you all for that. So the thought process for today or this evening was really for us to see where we are in our 4P assessments. If you'll recall, at our last meeting, we divvied up after we talked a lot about what the priorities for our committee should be. And we divvied those up into 4 areas. And well, we had a lot more, but some were collapsed or some were taken off of the priority list. And we came up with 4. And then we allowed everyone to try to kind of find a place where they wanted to run the assessment tool over that particular subject area. And so we have 4 of those. And I wanted to ask Mindy, because I saw a note before everyone started to present or talk about their particular assignments. But I saw a note, Mindy, where we were discussing kind of our committee being a little ahead of the curve in that I guess, doing the prioritizing of the issues and even almost developing those priorities and assigning them out, that was something that almost could have come out of the 4P assessment itself. So we're like kind of doing an assessment on a more discrete issue than was probably expected of us. And so if you could kind of explain what that is, so that even though we're going to talk about it, so we can see if we're either already too far in the weeds or whether we need to kind of come out and look at this at a more overview or broad type area. I would love to hear about that. But and then following that, we'll all kind of go through our 4P assessment assignments to the extent that we have them, and then we'll talk about what challenges we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the original intention with the 4P assessment was that we were going to, that the 4P assessment and the outcomes of the 4P assessment would help us to prioritize in our minds the issues that really mattered. All that analysis, all those questions that we ask, that would help us prioritize the issues that really matter. But what we were forced to do, because we only have 9 people on our subcommittee, and we made the intentional decision that we wanted 2 people to analyze a particular issue, was that we went ahead and prioritized. If you remember, about a month ago, we narrowed from our sort of laundry list of 8 or 9 distinct issues that we had pointed out down to 4. Like Monique said, we collapsed them. And so the way that I'm thinking about this 4P assessment, even though we collapsed and prioritized the issues, I don't necessarily think that means that we now skip the 4P assessment phase, because we still want to be asking ourselves these questions about the data that we saw, the trends or the lack of data, and asking these questions of who does it affect, and just digging deeper, because that deeper analysis will ultimately inform the recommendations at the end of the day. And to zoom out a little bit more, just in case this whole thing is feeling like very fuzzy to you, if it makes you feel any better, the other subcommittees, they're all in this sort of state of flux where the assessment and the research phase are kind of blending together. You may or may not be aware, the procurement subcommittee, very early on, they knew that they wanted to do a survey, and they already started working on the survey before they had even assessed the issue. issues. And so now they're kind of going back and doing a little bit more of that assessment. And so I guess I mentioned that to say that all of this work is a little bit fluid, and we're trying to work within, the capacity of who we have on our teams and the time that you all have available to do this work. But we also don't want to skip steps. And so, yes, hoping that everyone still feels and is committed, feels the value of this 4P assessment, is committed to it, but also feels comfortable in beginning to think about those next steps.
And I think each of us will probably have some really pointed questions or comments regarding this whole general concept as we talk, and maybe that will help. I don't know what just happened, excuse me, will help inform some of the gaps that we had. I think even like when Connie and I were talking, we got to a certain area and we were like, we don't know, we don't know that's what we want to know, or that's where that's the question that we have, or we don't know who's in power here that to really influence this. And kind of hearing maybe talk about that, I think that's where we're supposed to be. We don't have to know at this point. We can point out that we don't know, and that further informs the work or recommendations of the committee. So with that being said, I will give the floor to the first group, and I'm going to go in the order in which they were kind of laid out in SJREC's email, where he said, what every issue was or the priorities. So the first one is, and as for time, I'm thinking if we can just talk about our 4P assessment for like not even 10 minutes, like 5 or 6 minutes each, that would be good. Of course, you can upload your whatever notes you want to. You can upload to our page and Basecamp. That would be great as well. Or you could maybe send them to Mindy and we can collapse them into a single document and upload it, because we do have a little discussion that we need to have towards the end. So we want to be mindful of time, and already we have 45 minutes left. So let's start with the complaint data and outside review issue that SJREC and Davis had. And if you can remind us what we were talking about, like the shorthand may not trigger for those of us that wasn't our particular area, and then let us know what you found.
So what we talked about is the idea of there is no external review of complaint data.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us felt that when you read through the data, through their report of the of the complaint data over the last, I believe we covered 7 years or 6 years, there is no external review. So how do we know it's not being whitewashed? How do we know that training standards are being upheld? How do we know that training's even being covered? And so the idea is that there could be the opportunity for outside review of complaints and or incidents. And of course, just using the 4P assessment, SJREC put together is the issue affects residents and a lot of non-residents of Brookhaven, since so many of the incidents that were talked about were with people outside of the city. And it was just, this process came about because all of us, everybody thought the same thing. How do we know that was really being investigated? How do we know that wasn't, kind of the good old boy club that some of us feel like law enforcement can be, and some of us, you can kind of see it, that it exists. And then how do we go about that? And then, what's the power? How can it affect or empower the people that live in the city of Brookhaven, and of course, non-residents? And I think that external reviews, they can ensure, well, I'll just read it. They can ensure that there is equity in interactions between all citizens and police by creating a group of people who can make sure that policies and procedures are being met, and making sure there's adequate and acceptable training. And also they're a bridge in helping the community engagement and trust building between the PD and the people who they serve. And, that is our 4P assessment. So well under 6 minutes, but if
What
there's
was
any
it?
questions, go ahead.
If you want to put it up, if it's something that's not shorthand that you want to share your screen, you're free to do that. And before we get into the questions, I also want to ask if you had any challenges that you wanted to highlight here, not necessarily challenges for your instance, like not challenges in doing an outside review, but challenges in determining whether that's appropriate or what we need there. So just challenges in the process, not in your process specifically.
Yeah, so no real challenges in our process. SJREC and I were pretty much, we are the same mind that there can be a place for this. Full transparency, as the former cop, the last thing I want is external review, right? It's not in our blood to share. And then I have to look and go, okay, I'm not a police officer. How does this affect me as a citizen? And of course, I love the PD and I love the reporting they did, but I think there's a place for it. And so we didn't really face challenges in assessing the question because it's cut and dry, right? There is no review. So what would be the benefit? Who is it going to empower? And what's the process of putting one in? And right now we're at the beginning of it where we see there is none. And so we want to aim towards, that might be something that we would make a suggestion towards the city at the end of the commission.
Thank you. All right.
And I won't share it. The 4P assessment, we just used the template that Mindy gave us. And so I will post it to Basecamp after our meeting, or maybe even during our meeting after I'm done talking. And
well, Mindy, how do you want that? Do you want, would it be easier if all of us just kind of posted our documents if we had it, or?
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense to post it to Basecamp, and so other folks can see your responses.
Okay, all right, questions? I think Connie looked like she was posturing.
I just have a quick question. When you were going through the 4P process, did it feel like it was helpful or not so much?
it was not helpful for me. Just to be honest, I kind of was like, what are we doing, right? And SJREC was very, very well thought out responses in the way he typed it. And I didn't change anything. I agreed 100% with him. And we, as we talked, the only thing that we discussed is, would we put the words non-residents in there as people that it may affect? And it does, because so many of the interactions were,
not for taking residents. Yeah.
But, and you and Connie, you and Monique, I saw the Basecamp emails you guys put out. Your process is going to be a lot different than ours, because we're just dealing with, is there or is there not this thing?
Yeah.
And yours is a lot more fluid. So I could see where you would find a little bit more challenge in the process of creating what goes in what square on the 4P. So
Yeah.
For sure.
Anyone else have any comments for Davis? Okay. Well, I will with that move on to our second subject. And this is my lovely partner and I, so I'm gonna defer and let Connie report it out, since I talk enough anyway in these meetings. So is ethnicity, race, data collection and reporting, especially Hispanic. What do we mean there, Connie, and what does our 4P assessment?
Can I share screen?
Absolutely.
It's not allowing me to right now. I don't know if Mindy owns that or if I'm on punishment.
Yes, you are being punished now. Okay, I just had to change this.
Let's see.
Yes,
Yeah.
you should be able to present now.
There we go. So first I want to say that Monique and I, this draft is a work in progress, and we're still not done because we keep going back and saying, and another thing, and what does that mean? So what kept coming up, not just for she and I, was when we talked about the data that Brookhaven Police provided to us. There kept being a flag, for lack of a better term, around the collection and reporting of data, specifically when they incorporate Hispanic versus non-Hispanic, Black Hispanic versus white Hispanic. And, you know, part of the challenge was if we followed this process, and again, I think over time, if we have time, some of the bullets might move from one location to another or get elaborated on or changed, but at a rough pass or draft, our thoughts were that Hispanics and non-Hispanic Blacks are potentially negatively affected. And that's I just added that, by the way, Davis, I stole your residents and non-residents as you were talking, because that's the truth. If they said that a good number of the traffic stops, let's say, or some of the arrests aren't for Brookhaven residents, that doesn't change whether or not it is, there's an issue around it. We talked about the fact that the data may actually be inaccurate and unreliable because of it being subjective and inconsistent in the way, not just that it's reported, but even in the way that it's collected. So another flag that says, then what's the real meaning behind the data? Can we even rely on it? And then it singles out Hispanics in a potential non-positive way versus, you know, African-American, Asian Pacific Islander, Irish. They don't do the mixed Black or white, you know, scenarios. So to tell you the truth, we still want to do a little bit of further research, because what we understand is the origin of this is a federal mandate of how you collect data. And so to what end? And where is the difference? And this kind of falls in power, but the concern is, where's the difference in when the line, you know, what's the point of demarcation between federal versus state versus city? But nonetheless, conscious and unconscious bias may come into play when determining even how to respond to perceived threats or not, based on what this data says, and this data may or may not be right. So who's affected by it? And then the other thing that's not even up here is when you think about the people aspect of it, who's meant to be impacted and how? Because there's an intentionality around who's supposed to be impacted by policies and programs. So more information on that. In terms of the process, Brookhaven Police relies on, I don't even know what OPMs is. What is that?
Office of Personnel Management, remember?
I knew that. I was just testing you.
I'm here.
So for reporting guidelines, which is what I was talking about, and requires that kind of collection. But again, who is it supposed to serve, or what is it supposed to serve? And then we talked about race being a social construct and inherently historically oppressive in nature. And so if you think about even the inaccuracies of that, how does that continue to perpetuate white supremacy? And we are thinking there is a tie, and it's not even necessarily, well, let me say this, who am I kidding? There's probably an intentional tie to continued oppressive nature of collecting the data. That's the concern, or of concern. And I've got to move our people so I can see the rest of my screen. Hold on, let me put you all over there.
Oh, we can see the whole thing, yeah.
But I couldn't see
Oh,
to
okay.
read it. I moved you guys, thank you. So as far as place, self versus officer identification during an arrest is not even consistent with what happens when they book someone. And so when you think about that and the use of force and the quick determination, again, I'll pull bias even over there. The other thing we'll say about the self versus not, if there is a perceived, doesn't even have to be real, perceived threat, if you associate yourself with Black Hispanic versus white Hispanic, why the hell would you want to do that? What's it potentially going to cost you? And yet I get to self-select. So again, the inconsistencies. We talked about police deployment and the concern of that in terms of how resources are allocated or even you have access to. Over and over again, I talk to my white counterparts or families, and they talk about story after story after story that either their teen or their young adult or even one of them were driving while drunk, driving while totally inebriated and intoxicated, and almost to the number, they get an escort home. you know, to say, okay, you don't have a record, we're going to take you home, we're going to help you leave your car or let that other person drive. And that's not the story when I talk to my friends and families of color. The reaction from the police around them driving drunk or under the influence is different. So this data does matter because there are certain assumptions that are made around safety or what have you. And then we talked about the cost that includes negative perceptions towards certain communities and what that means in terms of overuse of force or not, overuse of resources, which is similar to what I just described, and the police's perception of, you know, what areas are or are not dangerous, or what situations are or are not dangerous. Some of that training is tied to data. So from a power standpoint, we talked about people in power not necessarily seeing the need for change because more times than not, they're not impacted by this Hispanic versus non-Hispanic or what have you. And we are still, you know, exploring the conversation about what it takes, what sort of a change model or allies or stakeholders, you know, there has to be a willingness for folks to get involved that do have power to affect change. We couldn't answer a few of the questions in terms of who's accountable for the decision-making or the decision-making structure. So hopefully more on that as this continues to unfold. Same with what I was stating before around where the lines are drawn, because probably understanding of that might have everything to do with what we collectively recommend in terms of changing to policy, if it's even possible, or in what ways it's possible. Let's say that. We know it's possible, period. It's possible. The question is there willingness to do it? And, you know, based on what we can impact, is it just through the city? Does the city need to work with the state in order to do something different? So figuring that piece out is still yet to be determined. And then we couldn't answer the diverse voices being included in the decision. The assumption is it's minimal because it's also minimal in terms of who's in power making the decision. So again, assumption, not fact. For y'all, we would love to get your reaction to this particular topic and what we might have missed or we might want to add to consideration in either of these points in the 4P assessment. And especially you, Mindy, because we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We just made it up. Went.
I have a question.
Yes,
Temper
Kathy.
myself.
Go
Go ahead,
question. I have been kind of like out of the loop because I've been on vacation and licensing's happening. It's a good thing, I'm alive. But when I look at this, I think you've done an outstanding job. It looks fantastic. But I have to go back to say, so what was, I mean, I'm just looking at it from just a person. I know what the problem was with the data. I think I know. But what was your original problem with the data? I mean, how was it reported that it wasn't reported accurately? Because when I'm thinking about what I remember, which I can't lend much of memory at this time, but it was that the Hispanic data was reported with the white data or something like that. What was the original problem? That's what I want.
When convenient. So we had a Hispanic.
I'm gonna pull the report while you explain that.
Yeah, so we had Hispanic Black, Hispanic White. And so then we would see all residents, like non-Hispanics versus Hispanics when it came to reporting arrests and contacts. And it was like, so everybody, Black, white, blue, purple versus Hispanics, right? Like that was a lot. And to see that together, just that was where we were talking about the negative perceptions of the Hispanic community, because it almost looked like half of all the crime in all of Brookhaven was committed by Hispanics. But then we find out later that then some of the white Hispanics would be included in the white data. And but then the Black data would not include Black Hispanics, but the white data would include white Hispanics. And so it was just really confusing And then when it boiled down to, I was like, well, how do you determine if a person is a white Hispanic or a Black Hispanic? We will say, yes, we understand that OPM does put these requirements out there. The census is governed by the census. The question is, can we do better? We can always improve. Like, we can't say we don't want to collect racial data because we're required by law to do so. The question is, and then can we have something more for our purposes in addition to that? And so that was really where we were at with that, because it was, oh, well, sometimes the police officer checks a box and sometimes the person checks a box. And I was like, well, you know, what does a person have to be check Black or Hispanic? And I was like, oh, they just have to want to be Black. Well, who wants to be Black? Right? You know, everybody want to be Black till it's time to be Black.
Just Black people.
Right, just Black, just Black people. So do
And not all Black people.
Preach. Well, you know, and some of them don't have a choice, but yeah, so that's what it is. So we always say at home, everybody want to be Black till it's time to be Black, you know, and so we don't know what that is. And so that was the original concern for that particular area. And
So
I don't
give you
want
an
to take up all the
example.
time.
Here's an example if you look at it. So let me even go down to here. Total arrests by race. If you look at white arrests, 57% or 1,293 arrests. If you look at Black African Americans, 42%, Indian 0, Island Pacific, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you go down and do it based on race and ethnicity, wow, look at that number. So white non-Hispanic goes down to 20%, whereas Black African American goes up to, I'm sorry, yeah, stays at 42%. And then Hispanic takes on some of the white. It's just hard to follow, A, what's the point, and B, what are the implications to Hispanics?
Yeah.
And then when we talk to, go ahead.
Is this merge data pie chart, is this new?
No, that was one of the first one. That's what started this whole thing.
Exactly.
This
I remember the separated ones.
No, they were all the same presentation.
Now, when he did the presentation, I don't recall if he did this and we started talking about it. They may have provided this later because we had so many questions around how you differentiate, but I know we discussed, what's the officer's name that did the earlier presentation?
The one that's good with data.
He's getting his doctorate.
Davis, but it's not Davis.
Lieutenant Snively.
Yes, Lieutenant Smiley, you know, and when I asked him, well, how do you guys go about capturing it? Well, sometimes we let the arrested or the offender self-identify. And if they don't, we look and we make a judgment call. Well, what the heck is that?
Yeah. So that's and that was the question you'll see on Basecamp, I think what Davis was referring to. When we talk about challenges, just to try to get back on so we can move on. One of it was trying to make sure that we on this committee was not picking an issue or making an issue out of something that wasn't an issue for that community. And I just wanted to be genuine in that. Of course, I do my market research at home because I'm, you know, married to a Hispanic Black man. And so, you know, he absolutely believes in this issue, but I wanted to talk to a few of our other commissioners just to see. And the response that I got was, this is a big problem. It's consistently a big problem in data reporting. He said, because there'll be people that are Hispanic and darker than you that will not identify with Black, or, you know, will not identify as white, you know, and so what do they pick, and how does that help with resources, and what's the purpose? And so it was a really good conversation, and saying that this is something we need to explore more. And there are tools that the Hispanic community or the Latin community or the Latinx community, whatever the, you know, the term of the day is, that they are working on for this very issue that was highlighted by the last census and the one before it. So with that, I want to kind of close out and make sure we get to our other groups, but that's where we are with our assessment. So hopefully that was informative.
And pop us a note if something comes up that you feel like is worth exploring or balancing sort of where we're going.
Definitely. The next one is our people training, especially cultural sensitivity, use of force, and mental health crisis intervention. That was Janice and Zaki were assigned to that group.
Yes, what I'll do is I'll share screen. And can you guys see my screen now?
I can.
Sure.
Y'all fancy.
Look at that.
Show off.
Yeah, this is, Janice and myself, we looked at, this is a very busy slide. So what I'm going to do is we have individual slides that we spent how do I hide this?
Of course you do, Zaki.
Awesome. Great job. We know who's doing our visual aids.
You're right.
Okay. So, we kind of looked at some of these points here, people training and some of the cultural sensitivity issues. I'm not going to go point by point, but at least some of the highlights here. Who's the most affected by this issue? We started looking at who are those people who either reside, transit, or work in Brookhaven. And there are a number of things that came to mind, people affected by social, race, educational, economic inequality, and of course, people of different cultural and religious backgrounds. And how does the data doesn't really give a lot in terms of the divide across these different dimensions, but at least with what was available, we were able to extrapolate the fact that reading through some of the notes, you could see that there were incidences of rudeness on the part of police, and how do police deal with people who are in a minority, especially socially, racially, culturally, or even with religious backgrounds. So that's something that we pointed out here. And the other thing that we also talk about is, those who experience inequity may not even have access to the resources to address their situation, financial hardships, and the stress that these people generally have to go through. And historically, if you see that this has been one of the major issues, especially for the minorities, where these become a hindrance in resolving their problems. And Janice, feel free to please add if there is
You're
anything
doing
else.
great.
Okay, how do I? Okay. And in terms of place, we started looking out at the data and saw that the crime, the intensity of the crime was predominantly in these areas, and I don't really have data to know why, but but having lived there, you can certainly see that a lot of minority population is predominant in those areas, and what is the cost of inequity again? What is the, certain areas have better access to housing, good schools, and policing certainly plays a big part in it, right? And it creates certain areas within the city which are safe and well-to-do, and the other areas which people don't want to, inhabit other than living there out of no choice. And an additional issue was also the issue of homelessness, and how do we have the police deal with it, right? Should they be coordinating with organizations that deal with issues of temporary housing, employment training, medical care, etc.? Because you see a lot of the situation now in and around the Claremont Road 85 access and certain areas of Briarwood. And how does that add to crime or not add to crime? I think we don't have data to support it, but I think that's something that we needed to point out. And in one of our conversations with the police, I don't know if this is factually right, but they said that they don't really have access to the mental health professionals 24/7. It's only on the weekdays, and again, during the hours of 9 to 5. and what happens outside of those hours. How does the police handle cases that really need somebody who has those skill sets? A lot of questions there. How does this issue arise? We were not really sure because we don't have data to go back in time. It's such a new city. But one thing that we certainly thought and suggested was we looked at the mission statement of the police department, and maybe we thought this issue of social justice, race inequity must find a place in the mission statement because it starts from the mission statement. And from there, of course, percolates into the police training. And of course, the city is growing more diverse in terms of race and is becoming multicultural, multi-religious, and multi-ethnic. And what is that we need to do to get the police informed and acclimatized with these communities in these different areas? So when they kind of meet these people of different diverse people, and how do they deal with them? I think that's an open question there. Again, what are the barriers to social equity? I think there's a lack of, if you look at the data, lack of diversity in leadership, a lack of training specific to addressing these issues. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about in decision making is to keep citizens at the center of decision making structure, and to use multiple mediums of communication, community outreach, and timely communication. That is to go out to the citizenry on regular intervals. I know the city has these open fora where everybody can dial in and listen and talk to, but again, how many of them actually know of the opportunities that are available? So that's something to look at. And as we started looking into this, we also looked at data. This was not data that this data was not available on Basecamp, so I went out, and this is from the community crime map. This is isolated to the Brookhaven city. And if you look at some of the days of the week where we have problems, it's primarily around the weekends. And around the weekends, and even on the weekends, it's late in the night, right? And of course, there are some pockets here that are primarily around the evening and maybe noon, 3-ish. So what does police do to identify trends of this nature? And how does the training incorporate changing behaviors of crime from year to year? When I started comparing this with 2019, in 2019, if you see the data here, especially in late night, early morning, it was not as bad as what it was in 2020, right? So some areas have improved, like here in the evenings in 2019 was really bad. If you look into this heat map, which certainly improved during the hours of 6 to 9 in 2020. So the questions that came to mind were, of course, in 2020, a lot more people stayed at home because of the pandemic. Was this one of the reasons that the crime went down during these hours because people were home? And certainly did that add to this spiking up and the heat map really going red, right? So, and how does this translate into training? Because the data does not go down to the fact of, to detailing when the crime actually occurred. It basically says that is the crime occurred is on the incidents. And
before you go on, if you don't mind, go back just one slide. So now I see what I'm looking at. Heat map says if it's red or orange, there is activity, crime, something associated. And is there any indication of how much? Like, is that between the hours of 5 and 6 p.m.? Is it 15 incidences?
Yeah, I think it does not really quantify, but it certainly shows you the intensity of it's certainly significantly higher than normal. But I was trying to find numbers that quantify what exactly were those. I could not find that, but this next slide kind of supports this argument a little. If you look at 2020, you see the issues again primarily around the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you see a lot of these activities kind of showing up here. In 2019, of course, it was not as bad, but certainly looks like something happened here. But one other thing that I wanted to call out here was that the sexual assault cases have kind of gone up from 2019. So what could be leading to that, right? Was it can we start thinking outside the box? And policing, of course, is of course a big impact. In addition to that, is it street lighting? Is it neighborhood watch? What exactly is happening within the city that you see these issues going up, right? So a lot of questions, and again, going through this, you'll see that in 2020, when I add more dimensions to the crime map, now you see that the issues are kind of spreading throughout the week. You see on Monday, on Thursday, and through the weekend, compared to 2019 when it was only isolated to the weekend. So a lot of questions. When I look at this, and then when I look at the number of complaints that we received, it somehow does not make that correlation. The number of complaints to the number of issues that are out there. So what is the gap? Why is the gap? I think is the question that we need to be asking. Are people not coming out and feeling safe and free to lodge their complaints, or are people not aware that they can actually go through this process? And even when you look at the complaints, these are the complaints that I looked at for 2019 and 2020. Looks like they're very much in line with the previous year. But one thing that kind of stood out was, if you look at, say, let's look at the number of complaints received and sustained. You see SOP violations, you see rudeness, and you see inappropriate contact. But how does this not translate into policy training deficiency? Right? When you see so many issues, especially with violations of standard operating procedure, I would assume that there were certain elements of deficiency within your policy and training that could have led to this. But yeah, that was a gap that we wanted to certainly share with the group. I can pause here and we can take questions.
That was great. I have some comments, but also on the previous one. And so, Monique, I'm wondering, in the interest of time, do you want to let the last group go and then we can talk about everything?
Yeah, we can. And if we don't get to the last item on our agenda, I don't know that that was aspirational, and that this part was kind of, or I don't know. So feel free to say what you need to say next group, and don't be compelled to shorten your time, because I can move that next item, right? The whole, what does community engagement look like, to our next meeting, can't I? Mindy?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have been on vacation. I haven't had a chance. I've been reading on community engagement.
Yeah, that is our kind of our task, one of our tasks for today. But of course, we have all this good information. We can't ask you guys to do a deep dive and then expect for it not to be deep, and so it's okay. I don't want to shorten that.
I think one thing that we could do is send out some information over email, because the community engagement work ties directly to this 4P assessment, which is what I hope was happening in your brains as you were like trying to answer some of these questions, some of which were near impossible to answer, is questions of like, I wish I had this particular data. I wish I could speak to this particular person, because the next step is around research and stakeholder engagement. And so we'll begin constructing and identifying what research do we still need to do to try to answer some of the questions that we have, and or who do we need to talk to, what stakeholders do we need to engage. And so that piece of it, I think, you know, we could send out some instructions over email.
Yeah, I think that may work. Just and most of y'all don't always comment back, but at least we can put it out there and we can have a thought process about what that is. But I do want to hear from our next group. And I don't know, Saki and Janice, was there something else that you wanted to touch on? I know he was pausing. I don't know if we were actually finished.
We are done.
You were okay. My only question for you all, I don't know if I didn't hear, but one of the takeaways from the time heat chart thing for me was like, if a lot of crime is occurring over here, weekends, evenings, but then our mental health professionals are available, you know, at this time frame, then, you know, that even just as simple as elementary as that, to me is like, hey, maybe we need to look at that. So
Right.
yeah, that
was my point.
okay.
That we need them on the weekend, not just Monday through Friday. You know, they need to be there.
I mean, the data almost doesn't support them only being there on the weekend. Like, it's almost like you already have data that shows that most of the crime is happening on weekends and evenings. So,
Exactly.
Mhm.
And most of that crime though is alcohol related.
Yeah.
The thefts, the theft, sexual assault, the burglaries, you know, petty crimes on up to major assaults are alcohol related. And so you're always going to see a spike in crime on Fridays and Saturday nights and Thursday nights if it's a holiday weekend. It's just,
yeah. But if that's,
but you're right, there should be, there could be,
health, I mean, or can be, or you're dealing with a mentally disturbed alcoholic, you know, it's already another challenge, right? I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so my last group, I know Kathy, you were in the middle of saying that you were just coming back, so you may not have been able to delve into
I haven't had a chance to delve into it. As a matter of fact, my question is, as I look at it, I think you guys have done an elaborate job. It's fantastic. I feel like a wimp. It's like, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And this is what I'm saying. My mindset is, what do you do with that information? Well, you got all this information. So then you break it down to, because I'm asking you, because when we get ready to do this, Lauren, I think you're my partner, right? Lauren Cole?
Yes, that's right.
All right. And when we get ready to put it all together, then we make a recommendation to, is this the goal? To make a recommendation to the Brookhaven Police Department. Is that the actual goal, or we just, what's the purpose?
Making recommendations to the mayor and city council for consideration.
Okay, so if we're doing that, are we narrowing down are you prioritizing? Because it's a lot of things when you look at everything, when I'm for groups, it's a lot of things that we're gonna have to bring to Brookhaven. And Davis was saying, like on the weekend, yeah, crime goes up because the city is moving up. The city from, you know, Leonard Square didn't have as much crime. Now it has tons more crime. So the city's moving up. And then, if I'm correct, remembering after vacation that the majority of the people that they actually arrest in Brookhaven, they are not from Brookhaven.
Right.
Is that correct? Right?
Right.
So when Laura and I start work, everything that you are doing, we stand at the base of it. Policing and community involvement, client-centered policing. And that's what, you know, building trust and relationships. That's basically it. Because when I saw Janice and Saki's data, the major areas were in Buford Highway and Claremont. That's where the areas of activity actually was. So when we do this, we come back in. I just want to make sure that I got clarity. Lauren might already be ahead of that. So we haven't had a chance to talk, in other words, guys. So we'll get back with y'all and we'll come up with some great stuff for y'all. And
yeah, and I think, I mean, and just, I know Lauren was at the meeting when we developed the priorities, right, Lauren? You were there.
No, I'm afraid I was not. No.
Okay, you and Kathy both got put together and assigned this subject. So the less I will set up a meeting with Kathy and Lauren
I appreciate
just
it.
to
Yeah.
explain what the concept was and what was actually meant by this community comfort and calling and engaging police, and maybe that'll give you some direction in how your assessment, should look. And then when we have our next meeting, we can lead with you guys.
Well, and
Right.
for what it's worth, since I pulled this thing up to look at it when the meeting started, and I figured I should know what we're talking about, then I did come up with something. Actually,
Okay.
since the idea is to look for recommendations, I think I might have identified something already,
Okay.
which is that the Brookhaven Police, it turns out, does, to preface this, does have a Spanish language Facebook page.
Mhm.
With posts and even videos in Spanish. As far as I can tell, though, nothing on the Brookhaven Police website is in Spanish. Or if it is, it's hidden in a way I can't find it. And then presumably anyone who's, has Spanish as a first language couldn't either. So there are various services on here, like a traffic complaint form. You can request residential security checks if you're going to be away from home. There's an FAQ with just information. And of course, there's just the contact us form with the various ways you can contact them in the different departments that you might specifically want to speak to. I would assume if you call the main number, then they will probably be able to direct you to someone who speaks Spanish. Almost certainly. I didn't want to test that myself. But for things like, and if you send an email, then that can be forwarded to the right person. But when like the departments aren't identified in Spanish, I imagine that makes it slightly more complicated for someone to know who to contact. When you're filling out a form for a residential security check, when the parts aren't in Spanish, it just makes it more complicated for anyone who doesn't speak English. And so that I think would be a fairly simple fix.
All right, well, and those are the type of recommendations that we definitely want to put out there. We'll talk about that more. Mindy, this is 6:30 now. So the next thing on the agenda, like I said, was about what does community engagement look like for purposes of our work. And I think we'll do some prompts on that and send it out on Basecamp so that we can be prepared, because we're supposed to just drum up the questions and the concerns, but we want to engage the community in a way that our recommendations are actually reflective of concerns and questions that the community actually has, which is where I was going with the whole, race data thing. I'm like, I'm all out here caping for Hispanic people. I want to make sure Hispanic people are actually concerned about this. Is this a problem for them? And are they already doing the work to address this issue? That's important to me, because I don't want to presume that folks in the space aren't already, working on this or developed a tool to make this easier, and Brookhaven just needs to implement it. So those are kind of the thoughts. So what does community engagement look like is the next thing we're going to tackle. Mindy, you look like you have a comment.
Yes. I wanted to acknowledge just the bulk of the work that's been done and presented out now. So Lauren and Kathy, as you will continue down this path of like comfort with engaging with police, what I remember being the sort of crux of why we decided to move that forward was because there's such a big question in everyone's mind, not only about like, are they accessible to people who speak Spanish as a first language, but also around like, what are folks' comfort level with engaging with police? And then because we are the Police Accountability and Use of Force Committee, what obligation and what control does the city actually have in increasing comfort and engagement and all those sorts of things? So I might encourage you to look at the existing community engagement programs that they have, which is a lot. And if you don't have that, I'll send it to you. But that was one thing. And then with Zaki and Janice's data-laden presentation, it was awesome. And But what I heard you saying, Zaki, was that there are just still so many open questions and unknowns. And so one thing that I would encourage you to think about is back to the original question, which is kind of what Kathy brought up during Monique and Connie's presentation, which is why. Why do we care about police officer training at the end of the day? And trying to just always bring it back to that central question. And we may, at the end of the day, come to the conclusion that maybe just one of these things is not a priority. And I want you all to know that if you come to that conclusion, like we really can't land this because, community isn't hearing what we thought, isn't validating what we said, like that's okay. That is part of the process. So I just
Can I add one thing, Mindy, just to qualify for Lauren and Kathy, because I might have been one of the ones that brought up the whole comfort level with police. I think that it might be a different perspective from various communities or what have you. So to look at programs and things, that's one thing. But when I think about my personal experience of seeing this beautiful, nicely dressed, drunk Black woman intoxicated while I was in a restaurant, and the restaurant right there, Verdi, and the restaurant manager says, I'll call the police. The first thing that came up to me, I physically sweat under my armpits and said, don't, I'll go help her. Because the thing is, Black people may not survive you calling the police. So even that, in my opinion, is something to be considered as you guys think about whether or not we want to engage the police. I literally left my lunch. I went, she did need help. She was totally, I sort of walked her through the parking lot to find her friends. 2 of the 3 were intoxicated, and helped her get in the car. I don't know that that would be the outcome based on how I feel and what our experience in the last year that has been on social media, but not just the last year. And to me, that's what I think about when I think about community comfort in calling and engaging the police, along with if my 20-year-old Black son was intoxicated, inebriated, and driving, how would he be treated? Would he get an escort home?
That's a good point. I'm coming from a different perspective though. When I think about community engagement, I know, you said that there are a lot of activities that they actually engage in, shop with a cop. There are a lot of different things that the police do within Brookhaven that I am familiar with. What do the people want? You can come up with tons of things to say that we're engaged. The police can, because you're policing yourself again. What do the people want? We can sit here and I can come up with 1,000, we can go through and analyze it, but our recommendations must be based on what people want, not on what, we just kind of like based it on that, because people are the clients. And so if police get more familiar with the people they're policing, then they become less violent. If you read anything of what they're doing, it's a good book that's called The Sum of Us. It's sort of like that sidewalk effect. Remember, we saw something like that at the beginning of this, and back in months ago when they fixed the sidewalk. Whatever you fix for one population of people, it positively affects the other people. So when we're talking about what kind of engagement we want to do in Brookhaven, then the people need to have a voice. The people on people on Beaufort highways having a different effect than the people in Linwood Park, the Black people, or the white people, or the Jewish people. Everybody's having a different kind of feel going on. And that's why it's so important that, we're basing it on data, but we also got to base it on the people. And that's what I'm saying, Lauren. So when you start working with me, I'm really wired about that. So we'll get together and we'll figure it all out. And I like what you said, Monique, because when we're talking about 20-year-old Black boys in America, it's a very serious thing. And police need to get a little bit closer to those kids so that they can understand where these kids are coming from. Probably looking at the movie Shy would start there and find out.
Yeah, building trust in the community. What does that look like?
Trust and relationships. Yes.
And that's where the community engagement actually, means from my perspective is we engage the community to make sure that we're actually representing their needs, not, Brookhaven, PD hanging out in the community if that's not something someone wants particularly or helps them feel connected. Okay, so we have next steps, right? We said we're gonna send out some kind of prompt on what community engagement looks like. We're gonna upload our 4P assessments, and Lauren and Kathy are going to present theirs at our next meeting. And our next meeting is, I have it on the agenda, is when? Is July 28th at 5:30. Does that all sound about right, team? Okay, if you need anything from SJREC and I, we will be back around. We're both around. I am back in town. I've been traveling a lot, so hopefully I can be a lot more responsive, Mindy. And we can get ourselves together and make sure we're all on track. So thank everyone for their hard work, and Zakia and Janice, your beautiful presentation. And we appreciate everyone, and we'll see y'all. Yes, Mindy.
Monique,
It looks like Janice or Zaki has
Oh,
something
okay.
to say.
Monique, I know I'll be gone the next meeting.
Okay, thank you for the heads up. Zaki?
All good.
All good?
Okay, my
Okay.
bad.
Mindy, you didn't have anything?
No, yeah, I'm good.
Okay, all right, everyone. Well, if all hearts and minds are clear, I'll adjourn the meeting. We don't need a motion. It is 6:38. Sorry for.
Are you all going to tomorrow's meeting in person, or no? Who's in person?
I'll be in person.
Awesome. We'll see you guys there.
All right, take care. Everybody be safe.
Bye, thank
Bye.
you.
I'll call you, Laura.
Bye.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mindy.
Thanks, Aki.
Thank you,
Thank y'all.
Janice.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
one. Great meeting. Enjoy.
Great meeting all. Have a good one.